Yeah, now we have here the new Modular, and we have the designer next to me. Who you are?
My name is Andy Grubb. I'm a designer on the Icons team.
So this was your first Modular you involved, or?
Second Modular. My previous one was the Boutique Hotel, so just before this one, 2 in a row.
So I hope you had a nice Christmas. But yeah, we are recording in September. No, we have September, yes, end of September. But this will be shown, I think, on 1st of January. Typically, this will released. Before we look at the new one and what it is and what are the Easter eggs and so on and so on, I have some general questions about modulars. And for example, one of the questions of my community was, how is the finding of the next modular? Also, what's the procedure? Is there someone, the family of Lego is deciding, I want this, or how is this procedure?
I wouldn't call it a procedure. I think it's more of a discussion. We see a lot of suggestions, of course, from fans and consumers that we certainly take into account. We know the ones that are on people's wish lists. We also, of course, have our own ideas of what might work, and then a lot of it comes down to trying out those different ideas and seeing actually what fits best, both as an aesthetic for the modular, so what makes sense on the modular street from the time period, also what makes sense in the kind of space that we have to fit. So sometimes we have ideas for buildings or stories that actually, when you start to work them out, how do they fit onto a 32 by 32 base plate? And you start to work in stairs and restrooms, and you also need to be able to fit your hands in as a grown person. Suddenly some things that you thought you had a lot of room for, you don't have as much room for, and that can help us narrow down, okay, what actually makes sense to fit in the space that we have. And of course, yeah, and it's a discussion to try out some ideas, have suggestions, and work it out as we go. Yeah, so I would say it's a discussion over the course of the development of the product.
What you mentioned is a fixed framework for this. I think only if you have anniversary, perhaps you can get bigger. But is there also in this framework how many minifigures? If I think what's also changed from the old ones to the new ones, that they have to tell a story and so on. Is this part of a fixed framework you have to have in mind when designing the set?
Yeah, we definitely have a recipe for success, ingredients that we know that really make a modular successful. Of course, having a story. Over time, of course, we've gone from having 0 interior to complete interiors. There's, of course, the standard of the sidewalk and the lampposts and the connectors, but we also know fans love the tiling on the ground floor. They love those interior details. They love little animals if we can get them in. Of course, minifigures, we don't have a fixed number that we put in, but we look at what have we done recently. Can we do something comparable? We have, of course, piece counts to keep track of, and we're always constantly looking at the value that we're giving to the consumer for the price we're asking. So all of those things go into the mix of trying to make sure that the things we know people love about modulars show up again in some form, but always with a new twist or a new spin or some variety to it.
Is there also timetable when you have corner or when you have a street straight like this?
Yeah, we've definitely established a pattern of, I believe we go basically 2 front-facing modulars and then a corner. Not to say that that's fixed in stone and that we couldn't break that or change from that sometime in the future. And everything's always on the table from a creative side to see what would make something fresh for consumers. But we also know people have expectations, so we don't rock the boat in that way unless we might have a really good idea. You never know.
And if you see the old ones, you realize you have different time periods. So you have the buildings that's settled, I think, in the old times, and then we have a little bit more modern, like the diner and the garage. Is there also a timetable when you can take or the 20s and so on, 30s, and or the 50s, 60s? Or will we see also 70s, 80s? I think perhaps this one is more 70s.
Yeah, so we try to stay in a time frame. It's not so strictly defined, but I think we want our modulars to be comfortably sit in from like a very late 1800s at the very earliest, maybe 1900 to mid-century. So 1950s, 1960s, maybe at the very, very latest. And of course, sometimes there are things that step outside a little bit of that, or such a distinct architecture that they properly pace themselves in. For this one, we started thinking of Jazzclub, the Jazz Age. That would have been in the 20s, but we wanted to make sure it was the building itself could feel global. It could fit in a lot of places. So we went to the time period when jazz had spread across the United States and was big, of course, in New York and Chicago, and drew a lot of inspiration from there. So it's interesting that you say 1970s. For us, this was hopefully some of the other clues in the building give it a little tip it back to the other way. But I don't know. That's interesting.
We will see the details shortly. One question before this. I realized this year, so we have 2022, also a modular, not as a modular, was released by Lego, namely the Sanctum Sanctorium. Is there a cooperation, or is this happening completely in a different area and they see, okay, I have the 2 dots there and the rest is without the modular team?
I think it's a little bit of it's cooperation and a little bit of friendly competition, I suppose. I think everyone knows how popular the modulars are, and what are the keys to making something that fits in with your modular street. And all credit to those guys for designing something which appeals to both superhero fans and modular fans. But at least for our team, the modulars are. As we were just talking about, in this specific time period, we want you to go back to a very idealized yesteryear. So yeah, we know about them, and those guys are diff. And all credit to them for successfully executing something that can fit in with the street for our consumers. Yeah.
Now talking about this set, when started the development? When was the first time you thought about Jazzclub?
Yeah, so the development of the model actually started, I would say, in summer of last year, but it did not start as a Jazzclub.
So it's the year before, so 2021.
Correct.
When this video is 2023.
Yes. So you're watching this in 2023. I started working on this in summer of 2021. Yes. And then the development was around, I would say, about 6 months, maybe a little bit more. But it started off actually as something completely different, and I had been working on a layout of the buildings that I thought was really fresh and interesting, that had essentially a courtyard or a little pathway in the middle, and it was starting to look like a shopping street. I call it an umbrella street, where something quite new, where there would be 2 separate structures on either side and then a pathway in the middle. The challenge with it was that we just couldn't figure out a way to give you enough space in each place, a building on the left, a building on the right, and the middle, where everything felt like it had enough room to breathe. So we had to step away from that concept, and maybe we'll come back to it someday if we revisit that layout and figure it out. But the Jazzclub was then the second iteration, thinking, okay, we're having trouble making this one layout work. What about this other thing? This building could have a staircase in the middle. That was one interesting thing. What about over here? This interesting interest, and we kind of got a feel for the flavor of building that might be, and then at the same time, what would be a really novel new thing to bring to the street, and a music venue that offered kind of a more nighttime, intimate vibe. Just felt really right for a new variation of modular.
Have you the time also really to do only work on this model? So if you are, it's the whole day from the morning to the evening thinking about this model, or is it one model between others and you think 1 hour about this and then 1 hour about a different one? What's your day life?
Yeah, in the thick of working on a model like this is all you're working on. This is a full-time job. We have some very talented designers who can manage to do work on multiple models, and their brain is going in multiple places at one time, so they might pop in a little bit here. For me, this is you don't want to rush these things, and you don't want to have too many other distractions from it. The modulars are very special, and you want to give them your full attention. So I was thinking about this more or less day and night for a good 6 months.
Is this also that you take this design process in the night? So when you go to sleep, is it that you think about what can I do, or is it really when you go at home, leave what it's at the work?
I know the healthy thing is to say that we leave it at work and we go home and live our lives. But sometimes you're either thinking about something really exciting that you might want to try, or sometimes you wake up and going like, I have to solve this challenge today, or oh no, what about this thing? But that's the joy of loving Lego, right? Like your brain never quite lets go of it. And actually, for me, just sitting sometimes and contemplating some of the funny geometries of the little snot problems is a great way to step away from other things I might be working on that are not Lego model related, but I have to do for work.